nature of the footprints, namely their remarkable consistency, their biomechanical appropriateness,
spanning the entire globe, involving hundreds of different cultures, explaining the same phenomenon by different names. At some point, you have to go, even as a scientist, you have to say, well, there's got to be something. It can't all be math illusion.
Kinds of stories. And then my skepticism really started to wane a lot. And what I always tell people if they ask me 100% if I believe, first off, I say I don't like the term believer. There's just not a better, not a better term, because like in science doesn't deal with belief. You can believe anything you want. You know what I mean? Science deals in facts, data, you know. Yeah. So I don't like the term believer. I like the term researcher. And I suppose if you've had something that, you know, like you're a knower, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You know.
And actually I have to tell you, like in talking with Dr. Jeff Meldrum, that's exactly, you know, there was, I guess like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I was at like a cabin with him and we were at a party and I was talking to him on the porch and asked him the same question. So do you really believe in Bigfoot? Yeah. And he said, you know, belief comes from when you don't have evidence.
It's faith. That's what the belief is, a measure of faith, but you know.
He's like, there's something that's making these footprints.
Right.
And to me, that's evidence.
Yeah.
So,
and that's kind of where I'm at.
Something's out there making these footprints.
Right. And what I always tell people when they really press me about it, I'm like, have you seen the X-Files? You know, the poster in Mulder's office.
Yes.
Right? I want to believe.
Right.
Like that's the thing is I want, you know, I want so bad, and for a bunch of different reasons. Like it's so first off, I'm a critter guy. Like how cool would it be if there was some, you know, if there's
in your backyard.
Yeah. Right. You know. Second, like if there's something that's remained hidden that long, it means that we haven't ruined everything we've touched.
Which is
you know what I mean?
So awesome.
Yeah, which like that's why this is worthwhile.
Especially something as big
right.
as a Sasquatch.
That's why that's why research is worthwhile. Like the Bigfoot research is worthwhile. You know what I mean? Like I said, it's not just me tricking people to come outside with the Bigfoot. It's not that. Like this stuff is worthwhile because if it exists, that mean we haven't ruined everything.
Exactly,
you know what I mean?
Exactly. And it's usually the bigger things in nature that tend to fall first.
Yeah. And I mean, if you should check out at the lodge while you're here, there are some pictures of what the park looked like before the park was established.
Right.
This was all cleared. This is all second growth forest.
Wow.
Erosion. You know what I mean? This is all cleared for farmland.
Yeah.
And not growing thing. I mean, this was pasture land. I mean, the topsoil is like 4 inches deep here. You know what I mean? They weren't growing a lot. This was all pasture land.
Yeah. A lot of these trees, they seem like really gigantic, but they're new.
They're newer. Yeah. As far as in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Actually, we were walking once with Mark DeWorth back here and he found like a really big old tree that must have been when it was a farmland.
They're definitely pre-park trees. And you can usually tell them because their branches start about 12 feet off the ground as opposed to 60 feet up the, up the trunk, because when they were there, they were out in the middle of a field not competing with anything. So, and I really love that aspect of this stuff is that forensic look at the forest, you know, you can like read the landscape and kind of see what happened here. So anyway, that's why this is worth it.
Right.
And then if we move on to like 2020 where something kind of weird happened,
because this is your experience.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
So, you know, I've gotten way more. I drank the flavor aid, so to speak, by 2020. You know what I mean? I've gotten much more into the whole Bigfoot, you know, subculture. I mean, I guess we're going to have thousands of people here at the conference. I don't know if you can call it a subculture when there's that many. You know what I mean? It's kind of mainstream now. You know,
you got all these people from all over the place coming to Ohio. You're like, what?
Right. So it's not really a fringe thing anymore. I don't think when you can, you know, but I did a series of videos, the series of YouTube videos when we were doing virtual programming here. We weren't doing in-person programming.
Through the state.
Through the state. Yeah, we did a series of videos about Bigfoot. And I think they're still the most viewed videos on the ODNR's YouTube channel, which also kind of says something. You know what I mean? Like it says something that interest is there.
Right.
And people take it seriously enough. You know what I mean?
So how can people see this video? They go to the ODNR website?
No, if you go to YouTube and just type in like Salt Fork Bigfoot, it'll be one of the first ones that pop up.
All right, cool. We want to make sure our viewers
make
see
sure
that.
Make sure you see the dude with the mustache, and that's the those are the right ones. So I did those, and one of them I wanted to do kind of a live streaming Bigfoot, like kind of a finding Bigfoot thing where I was out in the wood, recording. So I went to our group camp, which had been vacant since October 2019 because of COVID. You know what I mean? Like, no, we hadn't had it open. And I set up, and I don't really have I don't have a ton of. I'm not very tech savvy. First of all, I'm a field person,
Right.
So so I'm trying to keep my batteries charged on everything, And I figured I'd edit it together later. So I was I had a little campfire, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to record a little bit and just kind of vamp. I'll just kind of talk for a while, and if I need filler at some point, I can use So I'm talking, and I get this tree knock, and I mean, it really sounded like somebody just hit a home run. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And it sounded like it was right in the woods, right next to where I was sitting,
Yikes.
So I freeze, and I'm like, man. And I got it on film. You can hear this pop, you know, and even my iPad picked it up. Like, you can hear this loud, and I'm just sort of staring off into the woods, Now the tree knock thing, I don't know about it. You know what I mean? I've always been kind of when we talk about it, I'm like, I think if anything, it's a manufactured sound. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that they're picking up pieces of wood and smacking them against trees. I think it's if they're popping their, popping their lips or something. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's a manufactured sound. If that's, I don't think personally that they're actively finding. So, because this is the problem, and I'll do this on hikes. I'll say, now try to find a stick that's not going to bust apart when you whack a tree. You know what I mean?
That's interesting.
Like, just go try to find a rotten log. You know what I mean? Or a log lying on the ground that not only you can pick up and wield easy, but that's not going to blow apart, when you hit it. It's hard. It's hard out in the woods to just find you're not going to find a perfect piece of ash. You know what I mean?
Right.
That sounds like a Louisville slugger when you hit it against a tree. Most of them are going to blow apart. And I kind of doubt that they're carrying around their tree knocking stick everywhere they go. You know what I mean? So I think it's if again, this is all, if this is a thing and it's not just, like an auditory glitch that we're here, you know what I mean? Like I think it's a manufactured sound.
And that's an interesting take, because I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that before.
Yeah.
But it makes a lot of sense.
It just there are certain things that have always stuck with me that on the flip side of the Bigfoot stuff where I'm like, it's when they talk about oh, maybe their hair is filled with fluid and that's why they kind of can blur in and out. And I'm like, well, there would have to be a precedence for that. You know what I mean? There's got to be that's evolution works in a way that we would have to sort of have evidence that, so it's probably not it could be. There's a chance it's never zero.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Because until we find one,
it's never zero. But to me, I like using things that we already have a precedence for.
Right.
And there's tons and tons of I am making a manufactured sound right now.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yep. Some sort of vocalization. That's what so I'm sitting there and I just cannot and it sounded like every recording of a tree knock.
Right.
So
there's nobody here.
There's no one here. Yeah. And I was also very secretive about what I was doing. Like the park manager knew,
right?
Because and the lieutenant for law enforcement knew, but I didn't want anybody coming in screwing with me.
Messing with
you.
You know
what I mean?
Right.
So it does happen. It does happen. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
And I always lecture people about that. Don't you're damaging legitimate research.
Mm-hmm.
If you're,
it might seem fun and cute, but it's real research.
Yeah, it is real research. So later that night, I'm kind of getting ready to get some shut eye, and I hear all this shuffling around in the leaves across from where I'm camping at. So I'm creeping up to it, and I'm expecting a deer, a raccoon, or something. And I've got my finger on the button of my headlamp, and I get up there, and the shuffling stops.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, all right. And I'm just getting ready to turn my headlamp on, and I hear the same exact sound. I mean, the same tone, say about 40 yards behind me. And I turn around, and as soon as I turn around, whatever I was creeping up on takes off into the bushes. You know what I mean? So I'm texting a friend of mine, a researcher who has helped me out a lot here at the park. I'm texting him. I'm like, man, I got a second tree knock. Which I mean, barring any other terminology that we haven't. I said I got a second tree knock. And then I told him the whole situation. I said, I turned around and then whatever I was creeping up on ran off. And he was like, oh yeah. They were trying to distract you. And I'm like, oh, you know, can you
Yeah.
not? Like, I'm going to stay out here by myself. You know what I mean? That's because he also, at one point, he's like, all right, I'm hitting the hey, keep an ear out for campsite walkers. And I'm like, can you call it something other, like something not as creepy?
Like
camps.
Like
campsite.
The Walking Dead.
Yeah,
and
I'm
stuff,
like, why are you calling it something so creepy? Like, I got to sleep out here.
Did you see the big hairy friends of
Right,
ours?
yeah,
I'm
right.
sure, like, what's Harry and the Hendersons guy, right?
Right.
Harry,
Yeah. That's, he's like, oh yeah, keeping an ear out for campsite walkers. And I'm like, well, that's creepy. Like, now I'm thanks
I mean,
for putting that in my
I think
head.
people forget,
you
like,
know?
we all laugh about
Yeah.
Bigfoot and think he's cute and fun, but like if this thing really exists,
It's an animal.
and it's gigantic, and it could rip your head off,
right? Yeah.
and nobody would know.
No, right?
And that's the scary thing. I couldn't sleep last night, and I was up in the living room of the cabin. Tim's, sleeping away, and it's like midnight, and I'm like just on my iPad watching, and we had like the blinds open, and I'm thinking, what if this thing came up? If it's 10 feet tall, could totally look in the window. I mean, what would I do?
Yeah, right.
Would I run toward it? Would I run to go get my iPhone? No, I would run and scream, Sam, help!
I always say
After
that.
you peed yourself.
I always say that
Exactly.
because everybody's like, oh, well, if you see Bigfoot, take a good picture of it. And I'm like, I'm not going to be able to take a good picture. You know what I mean? Like, don't look at, I can barely take a picture with my phone as it is. You know what I mean? Like I'm not going to be the one that takes a good picture of Bigfoot. You know,
right. I think
I'm not going to be with it enough.
Seriously forget that it's not a joke.
Right.
It's like if it's a serious, living being out there.
Yeah.
It's scary.
And on that note,
right.
I always kind of point out, like, I think people always say, well, what if he would get found? And I'm like, 3 years it would be big news.
Right.
For 3 years people would be research.
Right.
Let's say 4, because there would be mammalogy students who did their whole thesis on that. You know what I mean?
Right.
But like 4 years of hard research. But if you look 4 or 5 years ahead of, like, let's say today, one gets hit by a 18-wheeler, 100% Bigfoot exists. It's news everywhere. I'd imagine the conference would be awesome. If that, you know what I mean? If that
was here,
but
John will get a raise.
If you talk if you talk to a kindergartner in 5 years, Bigfoot would be another animal.
Yep.
Because think about the improbability of a giraffe, right? Mm-hmm. Like, this thing with a neck that's 2 stories tall.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's a creature from fantasy. You know what I mean?
Right.
Every kindergartner knows what a giraffe is, and they're not, like, unless that's their favorite animal. I've got kids, and kids have always, unless they don't care that much about giraffe, you know what I mean?
And if you look at them, you forget how fascinating they are.
Yeah.
They are, especially when they're fighting each other and they're swinging their necks at each other.
But think about like the improbability of a giraffe, and everyone knows giraffes, they exist. So Bigfoot would become that, where everybody, and of course there would be the North American Bigfoot Foundation, where you could donate money to protect habitat and stuff like that. Of course, all of those things would happen. Like the lumber industry would probably be impacted.
Right.
All those things would happen, but it wouldn't be, it would not be the end all thing. That would just become another part of our. And we're good at good at coping with that.
We are very good with coping.
We're good at coping with that.
I think we all learned that through COVID. How good we are with coping. So here's a question for you, John. Right. So, like, if somebody has like a Bigfoot experience here at the, and I say experience because it could be auditory, visual. It could be
I've never had
finding a footprint.
Right.
So do they come to you? Or,
a lot of times.
Are you the person? Like, so if they go to the park ranger, then they would. I mean, because you're not a park ranger,
I'm not a naturalist, but so now I kind of am the person. It's kind of a joke now that I'm like the ODNR's X-Files.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because this is.
You're like the Fox Mulder of ODNR. Okay.
So stuff from other places now come here. You know what I mean? Like I hear things from other places now because they're like, well, Hickenbottom deals with it.
Oh, you know what I mean? Other parts.
Yeah.
So they get reports and call you.
Yeah. So people will, they'll find my, they'll tell people to look me up. Right. You know what I mean?
Right. So then do you go and investigate these?
Sometimes I will. Okay. Yeah. Especially here. I mean, I just went and checked one out in the campgrounds, in a ledge trackway in the campgrounds just last week.
So someone said they saw. Mm-hmm. Did you see it?
I did. I think it was probably people. It looked a lot like people to me.
Okay.
Like it didn't look like anybody was faking it per se. It just looked like it was. But that's just me. I'm not bashing.
And a lot of things can happen to the material that you're stepping in. Oh yeah. When it's cold, when it's raining,
it expands.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, tracking is a whole science in itself. Like I'm always skeptical when someone's like, "Oh, I'm an expert tracker," and I'm like, I've hunted my whole life, and I've had deer just vaporize. You know what I mean? Not like run off and I couldn't find them. I mean, it was like I'd shoot and they would vanish. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and I'm pretty darn good.
I think
at finding
Bigfoot grab.
Right. we had a good story about that. A guy told a story about him hunting out here when he was a kid in the early '80s, and they shot a deer, and he and his dad tracked it. And when they got to it, there's this thing bending over, picked it up, walked off through the woods.
Wow.
He had claimed it as his own.
There's quite a few of those
Wow.
out there.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Which, man,
But it makes
I
sense.
don't know. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's another thing. I'm always like, man, think of the number of roadkill deer. Like,
Yeah.
why would you waste calories chasing down a deer who is
Right.
literally built to run?
Right.
When you could just walk along the road in the middle of the night, grabbing, you know what I mean?
And
Well,
it-
I think all large omnivores,
Yeah.
whether it's a bear or us or
Yeah.
coyotes,
And even
wolves,
right.
they will scavenge
They
as
will
well.
scavenge because it's
Right.
there's an economy out in nature. You never want to spend the calories chasing something that it's going to give you. You know what I mean?
And if you're
Right.
that big,
Yeah.
supposedly 800 to 1,000
Yeah,
more
right.
pounds, even a bear, you don't you need a lot of calories.
Right. Yeah.
So real quick, John, because we're running out of time. Can you give us like really like some really quick little encounters that have been reported to you around? And you need to squish in a little bit more because
sorry.
you keep
I keep
come over
inching.
next to me,
Sorry.
Tim.
I keep inching over.
John, I just put deodorant on. And I showered the other day.
So so there's a pretty famous one, a former park officer here, back, and this would have been the '80s. The '80s were kind of a hot time for Bigfoot here at Salt Fork. That's kind of when Don Keating was doing a lot of his research in the area and stuff.
Right.
But a former park officer allegedly had one look in at the ranger station. That's a pretty like
the
key
ranger station that's in the front of the park, or
no, because the like offices move around.
They move.
The
Okay.
ranger station doesn't exist anymore.
Oh,
Wasn't this right when they were building the park?
Yeah,
They
yeah,
popped
it
the
was pretty.
station up
Yeah, it
and-
was relatively new.
Hmm.
So there was that one. Like I said, I usually get encounters that are. I've never had anybody come into the nature center with like sticks in their hair, going, "My God, I just saw a Bigfoot." You know what I mean?
Right. Okay.
Normally it's a couple of there's some degree of separation between the sighting and when I hear
They got to
about,
go home and like have a
yeah,
shot of whiskey
and like cope
and
with it. Yeah. I talked to two fishermen. This would have been last summer. Talked to two fishermen, older gentlemen. Seemed like good guys. Didn't seem, who had been night fishing out kind of in the southern end of the park, southern end of the lake, and had their stuff set up down on the bank. They were at the base of one of the hills here, and all of a sudden a rock rolls down the hill. So they kind of turn around and they think maybe somebody's walking down the hill,
Right.
dislodged a rock.
right. Okay.
Well, then they see one arc up out of the trees into the water. And then they're like,
Okay.
well, hey, they're yelling like, hey, there are people down here, stop,
Right.
Then another one gets launched out of the,
Right.
and they told me some of them were bowling ball sized
So-
chunks of sandstone.
Which
when
is-
they told
Yeah.
you the story, it just happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
were they like trying to maybe report kids that were doing that?
no.
Oh, okay.
After they processed it, they kind of came to the conclusion that it was, because that's what
There
they
had
were.
to be something
That's what they were
large.
saying was like,
Yeah.
once we saw the size of the rocks that were getting lobbed at us, we decided it probably wasn't a person doing it.
So that was here.
That was here,
like last
summer. Yeah.
So
that
would
was
you
here.
say then, obviously, there's a lot of theories on a Sasquatch. Would you say as a naturalist that this is an animal that's more nocturnal?
I would probably say it's an opportunistic, like a coyote would be a good example of that.
Okay.
I would imagine first off that they're probably migratory.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And they probably follow food sources,
Right.
and exploit seasonal food sources.
Okay.
That would be my guess.
Right.
And I would also say, and there seems to be some evidence of that because sightings in particular, like recurrent sightings in areas, seem to be on a cycle. You know what I mean?
A seasonal cycle.
A seasonal cycle
Okay.
in some areas, at least
Right.
in Ohio.
Right.
And yeah, I would say they're probably, because there's a ton of encounters at night, road
Mhm.
crossings, things, and like they're
Mhm.
probably primarily nocturnal, but
Mhm.
they would probably, because there are lots of sightings during the day. I mean, Patty was
Right.
Patty was
yeah.
a daytime sighting.
Right.
So
The
they
Patterson
probably
Gimlin film.
yeah, so they probably shift based on what food source is available. You know, they're most likely on a breeding cycle too.
Okay,
You know what I mean? They
okay.
probably, you know, so, you know, think about that. Like that would probably change what time of day you're going to be, you know, out and about.
Can you think of some, like, obviously sources of meat are pretty clear about what they would probably be eating, but what kind of like vegetation do you think that they would be eating
there's
here in Ohio, and like
there's a ton to eat
So
here.
like, what can you give us some ideas of things?
Yeah,
or?
so first off, here at Salt Fork,
Yeah.
we have on old homesteads and stuff that are out in the, there's still old apple orchards.
Oh,
you know, like,
really? That's so cool.
The apples are small and hard, and you know
right,
what I mean?
because they're not being like cared for and stuff.
But still, they're out there.
Okay.
You know? You have tons of mass producing trees, and that's massed with a T. So like nuts. You know,
right.
Hickory nuts, beech nuts, things like that, walnuts.
Yep.
Tons of, and that's real high protein. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, do you guys have any like berries? Or
yeah. So
like...
there's you know, black raspberries. There's blueberry. You know, there's like gooseberries and stuff.
Right.
Mushrooms
that are growing wild.
This is mushroom season right now.
Right.
So yeah, that are growing wild. We have pawpaw. If you've never had a pawpaw,
why does that sound so familiar?
They're the best thing in the world.
Tell us about it. Shane was telling us about it.
Right. I don't know if we have pawpaw in Delaware. Probably
not. I
not.
don't know. I'd have to look at their range map.
Yeah.
But they're here.
Okay.
And
what is it? It's a fruit, or
it is a fruit. It's a weird. So the family, it's called the custard apple family, and that's kind of a good example. You know, they're a good name.
Is it a crab apple?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's actually its own thing. It's actually a tropical plant that grows in temperate Appalachia.
Oh, cool.
The rest of the members of that family live in the tropics. It's just that one. The pawpaw lives up here in, you know, temperate North America, temperate eastern North America. So yeah, we've got pawpaws, we have persimmons, lots of fruit bearing trees, you know, that are natural, that are native fruit bearing trees.
Right.
Not to mention things like cattails are like an excellent starch, you know.
Right. And there's definitely plenty of water.
And then you also have to look at like insect life.
Okay.
You know, when we have the cicadas, you know, the cicada emergence, when you have there's nothing that isn't eating cicadas.
Right.
Even squirrels, you can watch squirrels, you learn they're herbivores, right? They eat nuts.
Right.
If there's all these free calories running around, you're eating those.
Right.
You know, and I mean, the last time we had a big cicada emergence, I was learning how to fly fish.
Right.
And every single bluegill that I would catch would be like literally stuffed. You could like open their mouth and see cicadas. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Because that's what they were eating.
Right.
Snakes and everything will eat cicadas. So I mean, cicadas are also very, very tasty. If you've never had one, if you've never had one, they're delicious.
All right, keep in mind.
I'll fry them in a little fat. Make them as unhealthy as possible. Yeah,
get some
great.
ketchup. I would eat them.
Well, she would. Well, that's the thing, though. Like Western civilization is kind of the outlier globally. We're the only ones that don't really exploit insects as a protein source.
Right.
You know what I mean? Most other places do. So, and it would make sense. So there's a ton of, you know, insect calories out there. I mean, even bears, when they first emerge in the spring, they're eating a ton of insects.
Right.
You know,
they got to catch up.
Yeah.
So they'll eat anything.
And they're available.
So So we have an environment here at Salt Fork that can support a Sasquatch.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Right.
I mean, there's, you know, along with the hunting, I do a lot of foraging,
right?
And I mean, it's relatively easy in a place like this to find, you know, a meal. Like it's not that hard to, you know, find a meal. And if you're I would imagine that the calories certainly aren't scarce out there, right? You know,
so this would be a prime location for a 400-pound omnivore.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe not a ton of them, you know what I mean?
Right.
But a small family unit. For sure, could exploit 20,000 acres. You know,
I mean, if you're looking at the park as 20,000 acres, and you're talking about Sasquatches, how many do you think could live here to support a population?
Man, now see, this is
these are naturalist questions.
They don't have to be a population if they're migrating.
This is a good question. Right? However, I'd hate to answer it because this is getting into where I would really want, because I'm with the natural resources background, I'd really want to run some sort of statistical model through, you know what I mean?
Right,
I'd hate
you
to
have
speculate
to do it
about you know, we could probably support 2 bears, you know what I mean? 2 adult bears, that we're breeding, you know, and having young, and those young staying around for a while. And a family. So yeah, like a family I could see, you know, or like a small group Which
So no more than 10.
yeah, that's
Okay.
yeah, right.
Okay.
And that's without doing any sort of like computer,
Right.
model or something. But
And that would probably be the max, 10.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if you're thinking about 10 Sasquatches living on 20,000 acres of land, and the people land ratio
right.
here is not
Yeah.
Well, nobody lives here. It's
Nobody
just
lives
people
here,
Right.
yeah, it's just
So
And honestly, most folks don't go off the trail. You know what I mean?
okay, right.
So there's a lot
And
of
going off trail would be important in having a
Right,
Bigfoot
yeah, yeah.
experience. Oh, okay.
Well, no, I'm just saying
Oh.
that there are places that people just aren't.
Okay,
You know what I
gotcha,
mean?
gotcha.
Like there are people that people just aren't.
Okay.
You know?
Well, we'll have to keep that in mind. We
Um,
were actually thinking about doing a night.
Oh yeah,
I don't know about a night hike.
Do a night hike, but
But-
what I mean is like if you wanted to hide, there are places where you're not going to be seen by
Right.
people, until
Right.
deer season gets here in December,
Right, right.
when people are just everywhere. But there are places where people just aren't,
Well, I mean, it's definitely an exciting place to come.
Yeah.
And we are running out of time. Did you
Yeah.
have any more questions,
No,
Tim?
I mean,
yeah.
amazing that we got John here.
Oh,
Oh,
my
I'm
God, we're
super
so
excited.
super
Yeah.
excited.
Well, thanks for
Yeah,
talking to
we're
me.
just sad that it's like raining and freezing, but we got everything
Yeah.
set up so we could do it here under our
Yeah.
cabin. But
Great.
we do really appreciate you, John.
Well, thanks.
And we're
And
super
I appreciate
excited
you guys.
to seeing you for the rest of the weekend
And,
too.
Yeah, so they can, if the folks want to find out, keep up with the park.
Yeah.
What should they do?
Um,
Yeah, and how can they keep up with you?
Okay,
If you
so
Yeah.
want to.
Let's do
oh
that.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So as far as park stuff goes, if you're interested in coming to like the Bigfoot hikes or any of my programs, the ODNR's website, the Ohio Department of Natural, if you just search Saltport, there's an option for events calendar, to see what upcoming events there are, or Saltport's Facebook page has all that posted. I just posted Maze this week, so all of that stuff gets posted on there. As far as me, if you look up Hickenbottom John on Instagram, you're welcome. I keep it open. I post mostly pictures of critters that I find. I don't post a ton of Bigfoot stuff, but,
Right. But I think that's important though for people to get into the other things that are going out in the woods, because you're probably never going to see a Bigfoot,
right? Yeah.
Or hear one, or see a footprint. But find something that you love to do outdoors.
And it is, that's exactly it. We try to tell people. I love that you said that, because we try. If you go out looking for Bigfoot every time,
Guess
you're
what?
probably going to be disappointed.
It's like trying to get struck by lightning on a perfectly sunny day.
But you've exponentially increased your chances if you're going out every day.
Doing
picking
something
mushrooms
else
or
that
bird
you love.
watching. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
Awesome.
yeah, look me up on Instagram. I had it for 4 years before I started posting anything, and then I started posting. I just got it mostly for the Bigfoot community. I started like, oh yeah, well here's my Instagram, and now that's what I, kind of what I use it for.
Well, I'm going to start following you.
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
I follow you guys on there.
Yeah.
So that's how you set this up. It was on Instagram.
I tracked it. Oh, we are already connected, but
because the book's great.
oh, thank you.
Yeah. So.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, John.
Thank you so
This
much,
is
John, for
amazing.
being here. All right. Well,